What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Book Space, where we do book reviews and tell stories. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath. If you were not here last week, I did a review of his other book, Talking to Strangers. If you have not checked that out yet, please do. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Now, true to our tradition here, I'm going to read to you the first page of Malcolm Gladwell's book. And I have got the large print version, so my words are a little big. So I will read like up the first page and a half of the next one. So the first chapter is Goliath, and a quote that says, "Am I a dog that you should come to me with sticks?" So it starts off like this. At the heart of ancient Palestine is the region known as the Shephelah, a series of ridges and valleys connecting the Judean mountains to the east with the wide, flat expanse of the Mediterranean plain. It is an area of breathtaking beauty, home to vineyards and wheat fields and forests of sycamore and terebinth. It is also of great strategic importance. Over the centuries, numerous battles have been fought for control of the region because the valleys rising from the Mediterranean plain offer those on the coast a clear path to the cities of Hebron, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem in the Judean highlands. The most important valley is Ajalon in the north, but the most storied is the Elah. The Elah was where Saladin faced off against the Knights of the Crusades in the 12th century. It played a central role in the Maccabean Wars with Syria more than 1,000 years before that. And most famously, during the days of the Old Testament, it was where the fledgling kingdom of Israel squared off against the armies of the Philistines. Now, Malcolm Gladwell starts off with the story of David and Goliath, and he tries to reimagine it and give us an alternative narrative from what we have grown up hearing and listening to and being taught. I am a Christian, and for me, the story of David and Goliath has been retold many, many times. And in the story, we hear of how our God was able to use David, a small shepherd boy, to defeat this huge giant, which was threatening the armies of Israel. According to Malcolm Gladwell's version, he says that there were two main things. One was that Goliath thought that David was going to fight him on the same terms as he was used to, which is by using by using a sword. A sword. The second thing was that apparently Goliath had medical issues. Because he was such a huge man, apparently he had a genetic condition that caused him to become such a huge man, and therefore the medical condition that caused him to be huge also gave him a disadvantage that he could not really see very well. And so that's why, according to Gladwell, he says, "Why are you coming to me with sticks? Am I a dog?" He says sticks because, according to Gladwell, Goliath couldn't really see properly, and so as David was approaching him, he was seeing double, and so he couldn't see David very clearly. Firstly, secondly, David surprised him because Goliath's advantage was in front-to-front combat. Like, the person had to be close within range. He had to be also using a sword so that Goliath could showcase his strength. But because David did not battle him in his usual terms of sword, he used stones that was that was something Goliath was not anticipating. This is according to Malcolm Gladwell. And so from this story, he then goes on to expand and to give us examples of how we see the same thing of David and Goliath in our everyday world. If you were here last week, you would have seen me trying to explain how Malcolm Gladwell uses real life cases or real life events to help us to understand a concept that he's trying to put across. When I was reading the other book, Talking to Strangers, I was thinking it's fiction until I was like, oh wow, I searched them and I was like, wow, these are actually real people and real cases. So anyway, his writing style is the same. The way he laid out the book, Talking to Strangers, is similar to the way he lays out David and Goliath, in that he uses real life examples, real life cases to put across a point. And it seems like he's very, very well researched. He is a journalist for the New Yorker, so I guess I'm not surprised. So anyway, he puts across a couple of ideas. One is about the advantages of disadvantages and the disadvantages of advantages. Just using the story of David and Goliath, we see that David was disadvantaged in the fact that he was way smaller than Goliath. He was not used to face-to-face combat using a sword like Goliath. When he tried to put on the armor that King Saul had given him, it was too heavy for him because he was small. So all those three things were a disadvantage for David. But were they really disadvantages? Because when you look at it, the fact that David was small made him very fast. The fact that he was not used to face-to-face combat made him gave him strength in that he was not matching Goliath in his area of strength. He was now using another method to fight the giant. So he sort of explores that the advantages of disadvantages, that what we may see and perceive as a disadvantage, actually sometimes if we look at it and strategize, can be used for our advantage. And he goes on to say as well, on the other breath, what Goliath was using as his advantages were actually disadvantages. Say for instance, his size. Goliath was a giant, and because he was a giant, although that made him very scary and very imposing, and if you went to face combat with him, he would use that strength, just his inertia, to be able to defeat you. But that also made Goliath wasn't very mobile. He wasn't agile. He wasn't quick. He couldn't really maneuver quickly because he's so big. One. Secondly, that meant that if somebody was going to shoot at him, or as David did, use his sling to as a weapon against him, that made him really hard to miss. So that made him a big, slow-moving target, which was a disadvantage. And so that was the first concept that Malcolm Gladwell put across. He also put across the idea of, as part of expanding that idea of a disadvantage being an advantage, or an advantage being a disadvantage, he put across the case of Caroline Sachs, who, this I think is a pseudonym, I don't think it's a real name. But anyway, Caroline was an excellent student, and at the school that she went to, she was a top student. And as top students do, she went on to join a top-tier university. But the thing is, the university that she went to, everybody was intelligent, and so all of a sudden she became a small fish in a big pond. Whereas in her previous school, that was much smaller, she was a big fish in a small pond, and that transition gave her a disadvantage in that she was now not sure of herself. She could see others thriving when she was struggling, and she started to doubt herself and think, oh, I'll never get it. And in the end, she actually ended up changing course and completing a course that is non-STEM related, although she was very keen on the sciences. And so that was one thing that came up that I thought was really interesting. I was like, oh my gosh, in that story, I sort of found kind of identified with Carolyn a lot. But anyway, I digress. The other idea and theory that Malcolm Gladwell brought up in this book was the theory of desirable difficulty. Now, David, from his story in the Bible, he was more of somebody that was sort of forgotten out in the fields, taking care of the sheep. Even when the prophet Samuel came to his father's house to anoint a king, his father didn't even present him as an option. Like, he was just the youngest. He was the youngest. I guess he was just the, yeah, one of the, yeah, he there wasn't anything in particular that his family thought was particularly impressive. He was just David who took care of the sheep, right? But in that undesirable difficulty of perhaps being overlooked and being looked down upon because he was the youngest, and just being given tasks that nobody else wanted to do, he actually learned how to fight, because as he was talking to Goliath, he was telling him how he would feed his head to the fowls of the air, just like, he had fought a bear at one point, and the lion, and all those skills had been gotten out of the need to protect the sheep, because I'm sure if he had gone back home with sheep missing, his father wouldn't have been happy. And so Malcolm Gladwell explores the idea of desirable difficulty. And in that section of the book, he gives us examples of people who are now very, very successful, who, as they were growing up and still are dyslexic. And that difficulty of trying to learn to read as a child and not being able to read properly even as an adult propelled them to hone in their other skills and to be persistent in what they do, and to be bold. Because, as a child, once you may find it hard to read, of course, people are going to laugh at you. They're going to think that you're not very bright, but you have to depend upon your other senses to help you. Like, one of them, his memory was really sharp. If you tell him something once, he won't forget it. And then the other one as well was very tenacious. Like, if he's gonna do something, like, it doesn't matter if people laugh. It doesn't matter if people disagree. If, like, he's convinced, he will pull through. He will follow something through to the end. They also talk about the story of a cancer researcher who was researching leukemia. His name is Emil J. Friedrich. And his childhood was very difficult, very, very difficult. And that gave him strength and courage as a cancer researcher, because some of the things that could make you flinch or make you, how can I put it, make you feel compassionate, with things that he could overlook and just soldier on. And so, Malcolm Gladwell talks to us about the concept of desirable difficulty. Overall, I thought the book was pretty interesting. I enjoy. I think Malcolm Gladwell's writing styles is interesting. Like, I haven't seen somebody write like that before. But I guess, yeah, I haven't seen somebody write like that before. Um, he sells you a concept and backs it up with data and stuff like that. And in the book, he even puts like asterisks. Like if he says something, he will put an asterisk like here, and then he will go on to explain where that is coming from, the background of it. So I thought that was pretty good because then you sort of have more to the story than just his perspective. So overall, I really enjoyed the book. I really liked it. I now am very, very tempted to go and look for his other book titled Outliers, which talks about, you know, successful people and how they become successful. I think that would be a pretty good read, considering that he puts so much work into the research and puts data to back it up. I think that would be really, really interesting to read. So anyway, if you have read this book, David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, please let me know in the comment section below what you think and what your biggest takeaway was from the book. For me, the biggest lesson was this. In life, we will have challenges. In life, we will have things that can be looked upon as advantages and as things that potentially could keep us down. But sometimes it is how you look at your disadvantages, how you look at your disabilities, that will determine whether you will make it or not. Sometimes you have to strategize and use what you have. Even if you're not the Goliath in the room, use what you have to your advantage. Like David used his background in tending to the sheep, his skills that he had learned from overcoming the lion, how people had always looked twice at him and underestimated him to his advantage, because all three things helped him to overcome Goliath. So I guess biggest takeaway, you don't have to be a Goliath to win. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate your company. Give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see more content like this. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified every time I release amazing content. Until next time, see ya.